In today's video, we're diving into the action-packed story of a marksman, a thriller that follows an ex-Marine living a quiet life right near the Arizona-Mexico border. But things don't stay peaceful for long. He gets caught up in a deadly chase when he tries to help a young boy being hunted by a ruthless drug cartel. Will the kid make it out alive and find his family again? Let's break it down. The story kicks off in Mexico. A kid named Miguel lives with his mom, Rosa. His dad passed away when he was just a baby. One day, Rosa gets a frantic call from her cousin Carlos. Turns out, Carlos swiped a pile of cash from a drug gang, and now they're coming after him. He begs Rosa to grab the money and get the heck out of there. Sadly, Carlos doesn't get far. The cartel leader, Mauricio, finds out Carlos contacted Rosa just before he was captured. Assuming she now has the cash, Mauricio puts her in his crosshairs. Carlos doesn't survive the cartel's wrath. They beat him to death. Meanwhile, in Arizona, we meet Jim Hansen, a retired Marine who's now guarding the border and taking care of his cattle. One day, while checking on his ranch, he spots a few migrants trying to sneak across. He radios it in and trails them quietly. He comes across a guy with a busted leg who got ditched by the rest of his group and reports it before heading back home. Back at his place, things aren't looking good. A bank agent drops by to remind him about the debts piling up. Jim had spent all his savings on his late wife's cancer treatment, and now the bank's threatening to take his house. Broke and desperate, Jim pleads for a bit more time. He tries to make some quick cash by selling his cattle, but the buyer offers way less than expected. Even if he sells everything, he still can't cover the debt. Frustrated, Jim hits the bar and runs into his stepdaughter Sarah, who works border patrol. He vents about his money troubles. Later, she ends up driving him home because he drank too much. The next day, back at the border, Rosa and Miguel are running for their lives. They're trying to slip into the U.S. through a hole in the fence when they bump into Jim. Rosa begs him not to report them. But before anything can be sorted, Mauricio and his crew show up, demanding Jim hand over the two of them. Jim realizes the cartel's not messing around. Instead of turning them in, he decides to protect them. A shootout breaks out. Jim nails one of the gang members with his rifle, grabs Rosa and Miguel, and takes off in his truck. Mauricio chases them, but eventually loses their trail. When he finds out the guy Jim shot was his brother, he's furious and vows revenge. Later, Jim notices Rosa's been hit during the chaos. The wound is serious. Realizing she might not make it, she gives Jim a bag with some money and an address in Chicago, her mother's place. She begs him to take Miguel there. Not long after, she dies. Cops and medics show up, and Sarah tells Jim that Miguel will be turned over to authorities so his family can collect him. But the next day, Jim spots a car linked to the cartel parked near the station. Suspicious, but trying to stay cool, he checks the bag Rosa left and finds it's loaded with cash. Tempted, Jim rushes to the bank to clear his debts. But when he notices Rosa's blood on the bag, guilt hits him hard. Remembering his promise to protect Miguel, he turns the car around and heads back to the station. When he gets there, he finds out that the family waiting to collect Miguel is actually Mauricio and his gang. Not wasting a second, Jim sneaks Miguel out of the building without anyone noticing. From a distance, Mauricio sees them drive off, and now he's even more determined to catch them. Jim heads back home to grab some essentials, weapons, clothes, and his dog Jackson. He sets out on the road with Miguel, bound for Chicago. Meanwhile, Mauricio and his men illegally cross into the U.S. border agents. Knowing how brutal these cartel guys are, don't even try to stop them. Once inside the States, Mauricio heads straight to Jim's place. He finds some papers with credit card details and a military award, realizing Jim isn't just some random old guy. He's trained. Mauricio grabs the badge and torches the house before going to meet another cartel member who helps him trace Jim's credit card use. Unaware he's being tracked, Jim stops at a gas station to refuel and buy a map. That small move gives away his location. Mauricio and his crew get the info from the clerk and head out again, hot on their trail. The store clerk had no clue what was going on and wasn't okay with Mauricio checking the security footage either. Frustrated with her getting in the way, Mauricio snapped and killed her just to access the recordings. From a CCTV, it was clear Jim was heading east. Around the same time, Jim got pulled over by the cops. They asked for his license and ID. Jim was honest, told them he was carrying a legal firearm and showed the ownership papers. But the officers didn't care. They tried to take his gun and said they needed to talk to Miguel. Not fully trusting them, Jim got into the car. But it didn't take long for him to realize something was off. The cop wasn't calling Miguel, he was dialing someone else. Jim figured out the cops had been bribed by the cartel to track Miguel down. Without waiting for things to go worse, Jim attacked the officer and knocked him out cold. Then, he warned Miguel to get moving fast because trouble was right behind them. Sure enough, Mauricio showed up shortly after and started grilling the unconscious cop once he woke up. But the officer couldn't tell him anything. Jim and Miguel had already disappeared. Furious, Mauricio shot the cop dead. Before leaving, though, Mauricio found Jim's map and took it with him. Now weaponless, Jim headed to a gun shop and picked up a shotgun, his go-to. That night, he and Miguel crashed at a cheap motel. Everything seemed calm until about 2 in the morning when Jim woke up and stepped outside with his dog, Jackson. He barely made it out the door before spotting Mauricio and his men at the front desk. Panicked, Jim rushed back, woke Miguel, and quickly called the cops, reporting a fake robbery. Then they both slipped into the bushes behind the motel. Mauricio and his gang broke into Jim's room, only to find it empty. Furious and screaming, Mauricio swore he'd get revenge. After they left, Jim told Miguel to wait in the car while he went to find Jackson. But it was too late. Mauricio had already found the dog. Jackson barked at him, and Mauricio shot the poor dog right in front of Jim. That hit hard. The next morning, Jim and Miguel gave Jackson a proper burial on a quiet piece of land. Later, they stopped by a church so Miguel could say a prayer for his mom. A kind priest asked Jim if Miguel was his grandson, but Jim admitted he wasn't. He just promised someone he'd take care of the boy. Later, Jim got a call from Sarah, urging him to hand Miguel over to the authorities. But Jim stood firm. He was going to take Miguel to his family in Chicago, no matter what. While Jim and Miguel hit the road again, the cartel tried to figure out their next move. Thanks to the map, Mauricio realized Jim was heading toward Chicago. He made a quick call to some guys there and set up a trap. Meanwhile, Jim and Miguel, tired from the journey, took shelter under a bridge and lit a fire to stay warm. They even burned the cartel's cash to keep the flames going. Eventually, they made it near Chicago, but as they were crossing a highway, Jim noticed men watching them from a flyover. It was another cartel crew. Realizing they'd been found, Jim swerved off the main road into the countryside, hoping to lose them. But Mauricio and his crew were fast. They cornered Jim. Luckily, Jim pulled off a wild maneuver, forcing their car off-road. Jim floored it while the gang had to turn around and chase him again. On a downhill stretch, Jim stopped to shoot at the vehicles behind him. With sniper-level accuracy, he took out the driver of Mauricio's car, causing it to flip over. Mauricio and 2 of his guys survived and stumbled out. Jim grabbed Miguel and took cover in a nearby shed. From a small window, he lined up a shot and took out one of Mauricio's men. With just 2 enemies left, Jim told Miguel to fire a shot from inside to distract them. Jim then moved to the side of the shed and took out the second guy. Now, only Mauricio was left, but he managed to sneak in and grab Miguel, holding a gun to his head in front of Jim. He told Jim to drop his weapon, and then, in a twisted move, told Miguel to shoot Jim. But Miguel had a plan of his own. He had emptied the gun earlier. When it clicked, Jim used the moment to attack Mauricio. A rough fight broke out between them. Miguel tried to help and picked up the gun, aiming at Mauricio. But instead of begging, Mauricio dared him to pull the trigger. Jim didn't want the boy to carry that burden, so he took the gun and shot Mauricio himself. Then he gave Mauricio a choice: die by Jim's hand or take his own life. Mauricio chose to end it himself. With the danger behind them, Jim and Miguel finally reached the address Rosa had given. Jim told Miguel to knock on the door. When it opened, his aunt and grandmother were there to welcome him. Miguel turned around, but Jim had already disappeared. The final scene shows Jim dragging himself onto a bus, holding his wounded stomach from the fight. He slumps into a seat, eyes heavy, and slowly fades out. We're left wondering, did Jim make it, or was that the end for him? Either way, one thing's clear. This story teaches us how important it is to honor the promises we make and protect the people who trust us.